All right. Well, welcome back. And thank you for participating in the discussion of the decade. We have heard so many great ideas from our panelists and from all of you. Then you want to tell me, what are some of your key takeaways from the information communication technology decadal? Mute.
It's such a fascinating world to live in right now. So here we are, oh, geez. I'm sorry that things have gotten totally confused. Well, okay, let me just summarize because we don't have a lot of time. We covered an enormous amount of ground in our discussion. We were looking at quantum computing, we were looking at heterogeneous computing, we were looking at optimization of the use of wireless spectrum. But the thing that was really interesting is that it all came back to the fact that humans had to be in the equation, that all of the technology and everything else was really less important than whether humans were being adequately served by the technology and whether or not we were driving costs out to make things affordable, whether or not we were adopting policies that would improve people's lives as opposed to simply making a piece of technology somehow more impressive. So the net result of all of our discussion, I think, is that we concluded that whatever we do as technologists now have to factor in not just solving a hard problem because it would make something else possible, but that we figure out how to incorporate human benefits, social benefits, and economic benefits into the equation. And so that, I believe, is a very important takeaway for all of us.
It's funny that you say that, because for me, the digital inclusion decadal discussion also really emphasized the importance of human networks and how we solve technology problems. And this may necessitate looking at ways of improving communication, say, between neighborhoods and communities, states, and the federal government, or how we better professionalize the field of digital equity and inclusion so that we can start beginning a pipeline of talent that's going to help us make the changes we need in order to enable this better connectivity for all. So it's really down to the human networks. So I guess we're going to just leave it there because we have so much more to talk about. If you have any questions or things to add to our conversation, know that you can go over to our website at marconisociety.org. We've set up a whole site there that you can submit challenges for yourself or comment on existing challenges that have come out of these conversations over the last few months and today. So please do so. We're going to be having these conversations for a while to come. But next up is our final presentation, and by a woman who has broken more silicon ceilings than just about any other I can think of. She is one of the most prolific researchers and practitioners in the field, has developed extensive breakthroughs to enhance the speed and reliability of wireless networks. Her innovations provide the foundation for the Internet of Things, smart cities, cloud-enabled health applications, and more. She's a serial entrepreneur, the dean of Princeton University's School of Engineering, and a brazen advocate for diversity and inclusion in engineering. I am deeply honored today to be able to introduce our 2020 Marconi Fellow, Andrea Goldsmith. Andrea.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Samantha, and thanks for putting on this incredible symposium. I have enjoyed it so much. There's so much food for thought in the thoughtful discussions of technology and bridging the digital divide and diversifying the profession. And so I have the very challenging task of wrapping up an amazing day, and actually not just a day, because the symposium preceded today. I was part of a panel on access for all a few weeks ago. We have more things to come. So this is really a wrap up of what you've seen so far and hopefully a little bit of a look ahead. I want to talk about the future that our connected world will create and how we create that future in a way that connects everybody, everybody benefits, and that brings in the very brightest minds and talents to create this connected world and develop the applications that the connected world can enable. So let me get started. I have been in the wireless field since the mid-'80s, since 1986, even before we started thinking about digital cellular. And I really believe that now is the most exciting time for the future of wireless networks. Not only because they're going to go so far beyond the communications that we've used them for so far, connecting people and connecting people to each other in the internet, but how this new digital world is going to enable communication between devices and what that means for our infrastructure, for our cities, for our healthcare. There's just so much more beyond next generation cellular and Wi-Fi communications that will change people's lives, that will make our lives safer, that will make our lives better, that will make our lives resilient to pandemics and to attacks. So the future of wireless, as someone who's worked in it for 4 decades, has never been brighter. And I hope that all the people listening to this conversation will think about how they can contribute to this future, not just in building the technologies, because one of the mistakes that we make as engineers is that we think that engineering is only about developing the technology. It's also about using the technology and using the technology for good. And I think that that's extremely important. Everybody who's listening to this symposium, everybody out there who thinks about how to enable communications for everyone has a role to play in making this future communications world better for everybody. So people often ask me, on the previous slide, I talked about these different applications in healthcare or automation or faster Wi-Fi or better cat videos. What is the killer app for 6G? Drum roll. It's connecting the next billion. We really need to focus not just on how do we make our cell phones faster or more reliable so we don't have our cat videos dropping out. The next billion people that are not connected today, they need that connectivity to make their lives more socially just, to make their lives economically just, to just get the basic homework connectivity that was talked about in the wonderful keynote. So when we think about 6G, it shouldn't just be about faster or lower latency or lower power. It should be about how do we build networks so that everyone around the world can be connected. That's my killer app for 6G. Now, how do we do that? It's not easy. I mean, we had many wonderful discussions today and in previous symposium that were part of this wonderful event. How do we bridge the digital divide? How do we connect the next billion? So part of it is technology. We can develop cellular architectures for long-range coverage. How do we get backhaul to villages in the middle of nowhere? Wi-Fi is great if you have backhaul, but you don't have backhaul there. You don't even have electricity there. So how are we going to connect the next billion, not just building the networks, but powering the networks? Cellular architectures play a role. Wi-Fi plays a small role, but you have to get backhaul, which means you need something beyond Wi-Fi. Satellite systems are emerging. They can play a role. They can connect people, maybe not at broadband speeds, but at the basic speeds that they need, but they're very expensive. Satellite systems have never trumped terrestrial systems because they're so much more expensive. And the parts of the world where you don't have coverage today are the parts of the world where they can't afford a satellite system or satellite connectivity. So how do we solve that problem? We also need to drive our hardware and devices to much lower cost and lower power, because power is an issue in these places. That requires tremendous engineering talent that is not focused today on hardware design. There's a lot of work on software and AI and machine learning. Who's going to develop the next generation of circuits, low power devices? We need those engineers, and we're not attracting them to the profession of engineering, or at least to the profession of electrical engineering and mechanical engineering, where they're going to build those devices. So in many ways, we have the technology today to connect the next billion using a combination of satellites and rolling out terrestrial systems. I have no doubt that if I had infinite money and could solve all the political problems, not just me, but we can build a team of people, we could connect the next billion. But it's so expensive. Who's going to pay for it? Is it going to be the governments? Is it going to be the local governments? Is it going to be the over-the-top service providers? And if so, they need to make money. So how are they going to make money? By connecting the next billion? And is that a type of system that we want the next billion to be connected by? If really the reason those networks are being built is to make money for the over-the-top applications. So where are we going to get the money to build these systems? We need a commitment. We need governments, including the US government, to commit that every single person in their countries has basic connectivity to be able to operate in the face of a pandemic where they have to do everything from home. Of course, there are some jobs where that's not possible, and connectivity can solve some of those issues, but not all of them. We need policies that make it easy and cheap to use spectrum to build out systems. And we also need politics. We need people to come together, governments, elected officials to come together and commit to bridging this digital divide. It takes more than technology. We have a ways to go on the technology front, but that's not enough. We need to solve a very complex problem that engineers alone cannot solve. So the promise of 5G, which is what is being rolled out now in cellular, and there's also advanced Wi-Fi systems, was really about getting to higher data rates, having ultra reliability to support automation, and having very low power, 10 years on a battery. But 5G isn't doing any of that except for the higher data rates. And so how are we going to get these lower latencies to support automation? How are we going to get these low power devices that are going to enable pervasive sensing of our infrastructure so that we don't have catastrophic infrastructure failures due to climate change? We need 6G and 7G and beyond. So this is a wonderful promise. It's great to have a promise of technology, but we're not there yet. We can get to higher data rates in some places, and usually in the places that are already connected, but we don't have low energy and we don't have low latency. So that's for the next generation of standards to develop. As a technologist, I had to throw in one slide on technology. I apologize, but I just love technology. That's the reason why I love working in this field, because it's magical, the technologies that we can develop. So what's going to enable this next generation? What's going to enable us to get to these low latencies and low powers and high data rates and connecting the next billion? Well, cellular systems were actually originally designed in the 1940s at the wonderful Bell Labs in a paper by D.H. Ring. This notion of having base stations in the middle of a cell and devices connecting to the base stations, that was thought of long before I was born. We need to rethink cellular system design. Think about how base stations cooperate. Think about things like multi-hop routing. Think about small cells and distributed antennas that will allow us to have much lower power and higher reliability and lower latency. We need to think about the new spectrum, the terahertz and the millimeter wave, but I'm a skeptic that that is going to be a pervasive way to solve the broadband problems because of the technical challenges of using that spectrum. The laws of physics are the laws of physics, and the laws of propagating signals at those very high frequencies is challenging. We also need to build low power radios. And again, we have so much innovation that can happen in low power devices, but we don't have the engineers to build those devices. So we need to attract the best and brightest minds to building this wireless technology. Massive MIMO, where we have many antennas, can help in pointing signals in a particular direction, but that also doesn't solve the digital divide because you're only talking to a single device at that point, and you're not really spreading the energy to all the devices that need to get it to be connected. There's new physical layer and multiple access technologies, many things that need to be developed and need to be invested in terms of basic research to get to the innovation there. Multi-hop routing, I already mentioned. It's still an ad hoc technique, even though we've been working on it for decades. And I'm very excited about changing the network architecture so that we use the cloud and we also use edge computing or fog computing and device computing to change the way the networks are architected, because that's what's needed to get to these lower latencies. And we need to look more at using not just cellular, but cellular combined with Wi-Fi, which we already have in a very clunky way. You know, you have to turn off your cell phone to go onto a Wi-Fi network and switch off the application and restart it. Can we do that more seamlessly? And how do we incorporate satellites into the network? So many exciting questions for us geeks to solve in the years ahead. I think I just want to touch a little bit on cloud-enabled wireless networks, because that's really what's needed. We need the cloud and machine learning in the cloud to understand how to deliver the latency that we require for automation, how to use these different parts of the spectrum in the most efficient way, and how to connect the next billion. Which network should they be on at any given time? If we can solve these technical problems, we have what I call this software-defined wireless network architecture, where basically, regardless of the application that you're trying to enable, it connects via this control plane with all the right parameters to the right network. And the Shangri-La really is that we don't have separate networks for cellular and Wi-Fi and millimeter wave. We just have a bunch of distributed antennas that operate on different frequencies, and everything just works, because all we really care about is that this works. We don't care what network it's on. We don't care what the parameters are. We just want it to work. And again, that's so important for the next billion. And this notion of using the cloud and the edge is really critical for coupled networks to enable low latency. But also when we look at the fact that our transportation networks are now coupled with our communication networks and our power grid, how do we couple them all together so that we can charge our cars wherever we are, so that when we have these critical infrastructure failures, these networks can readapt so that the power and the driving and the communication works. And that's important for pervasive sensing as well as for the smart grid. So many exciting things to do on the technology front. For me, 6G and beyond is all technologies that combined allow people and organizations everywhere around the world to interact in the digital world. And it's a very exciting vision. Again, I hope that the technologists and the non-technologists will join me and all the other brilliant engineers and social scientists and policymakers and government officials in figuring out how to make this world work. So I have a few other slides I wanted to touch on. Who will lead in wireless technology? I worry a lot about the lack of investment in basic research. You talk about technology transfer, but the technologies we're using in wireless networks today are there because of basic research that was done decades ago. We must increase our investment in basic research so that we have the innovations for the next decades to follow. Tech transfer is hard. I'm a two-time entrepreneur. How do we do tech transfer? We need to figure out the ecosystem so that we can create innovation hubs around the country, around the US, around all countries around the world. It's not an easy thing to do. I'm a member of PCAST, and I'm actually co-chairing a committee on looking at innovation. And I know it's really hard. There's no silver bullet. It's not easy, but we have to do this so that everyone benefits from the innovation ecosystem. We have to attract and retain the best and brightest minds, not only in each country in the US, we need to foster the best and brightest minds that are born here to go into engineering. And we need to make sure that the best and brightest minds around the country, as a proud American, come to the US to innovate and to develop those innovations and the basic research. And diverse people and teams create the best solutions. This is something that I've spent a lot of time on, as Samantha mentioned. Why is it important? Because diverse organizations are more creative, they perform better, and they have higher satisfaction of their members. The engineering profession struggles to attract and retain diverse members. We don't provide the same benefits to diverse engineers because of implicit bias and because we don't have mentors and sponsors for those diverse engineers. We have to make things better for the next generation of diverse technologists because it's about success and excellence in engineering. We need those diverse perspectives to thrive. When I look at where we are, and I won't dwell on this slide because I'm running out of time, just for women in engineering, and there's many more women than minorities in engineering. We're in the low double digits for students. We're in the low double digits for faculty members. Women leave the profession at more than 50% rate. Women are not patent holders. Why is that? And women are not in the boardroom seat of startup investors. And so I pitched many companies, many VCs, and I was the only woman in the room who wasn't serving coffee. We have to change that if we want diverse engineers to enter the profession and to be able to innovate. So much work is needed to make the road ahead for the next generation of diverse engineers easier. We need you, every one of you, especially the majority, the men, the white men, everyone, to mentor, sponsor, or promote a diverse engineer today or tomorrow, over the next year. That's my request of all of you. Make sure that you're promoting diverse engineers. The profession will thank you, whether you're in a university or a company or a professional organization. And I'm going to close by talking just for a minute. I know I'm a minute over, about the Marconi Society. I am a very proud board member. I am currently chairing the Marconi Prize committee for the next recipient after me. And I'm a very proud Marconi Fellow this year. This is a remarkable society. I won't talk about the programs because you probably heard about them from Samantha, but it really is a transformational organization that will help in bridging the digital divide, in diversifying the profession, and providing the thought leadership in the US, in other countries, and around the world to not only develop the best technologies, but to bring in the young and creative and bright minds to join us in this endeavor to make the wireless connected world that I've just painted. So I just want to say, next wave in wireless is upon us. It will change the world for the better, but we have to connect the next billion to do that. There's many technical challenges that technologists and non-technologists need to engage in to solve. We have to invest in basic research around the world. We have to unlock innovation, which is so hard to do, but we must figure out how to create innovation everywhere and attracting and retaining the diverse engineers. And Marconi will play a pivotal role. I hope you got a taste of the Marconi Society through today's events, and I hope you will engage more and join us in this technology creation, bridging the digital divide, and promoting diversity. Back to you, Samantha.
Woo! Thank you, Andrea. Though your words are incredibly inspiring, so right on. I have nothing to follow with that. So instead, I'm just going to say this. Thank you for everything. Thank you for those that have tuned in and are watching with us and have spent the day with us. And a deep thanks to our sponsors, our panelists, all of our attendees. This has really been a memorable event. So we have a quick video to showcase the digital inclusion concepts that we've discussed today. Let's take a quick look.
We believe internet access is a basic human right. Connectivity impacts nearly every aspect of our lives. If you care about education, women's rights, health and safety, innovation and economic growth, you care about digital inclusion. Globally, roughly 9 in 10 households in emerging countries are unconnected. Here in the United States, 40% of Americans who make under $35,000 per year are unconnected. The digital divide may impact your neighbor, your student, or your colleague. Digital exclusion is a driving force in social inequalities in the US and around the world. Until we ensure that every person has access to the connectivity, devices, content, and skills they need to make use of the internet, these inequalities will continue to expand. Leaders in policy, technology, and digital inclusion must begin working together. Each of these communities has different processes and motivations. They have not always collaborated effectively, but we believe our digitally inclusive future requires a new approach that combines the strengths and insights from each of these fields. The decade of digital inclusion is the Marconi Society's groundbreaking answer to this challenge. We are building an interdisciplinary group of experts who share our commitment to bringing the opportunities of the internet to everyone. We need you to join us. If we work together over the next decade, we can transform the landscape of connectivity. How will you shape the future?
All right. So the decade of digital inclusion is not yet over. It may feel over because we have come to the end of our symposium. But if you haven't yet saved the dates for our November 16th through the 18th track on network analytics and public policy on your computer or on your calendar, do so now. It's going to be a great series. There's 3 sessions, a great lineup of speakers, so you won't want to miss that. We're going to be discussing the role of network data in determining policy, directing funding, and looking at what we can do to improve data collection. So make sure you join us. Finally, if you want to learn more about our work and how you can get involved, please go to marconisociety.org. and sign up for our mailing list. There's going to be a lot of ways for you to engage and participate in all of the programming that we have. And we have a lot going on and queued up for 2022. So please come and join us. And thanks for spending your time with us today.